So today we're going to be changing the display on an Air scooter. It's the same process for an Air 3, an Air 4 or an Air 5. The only difference being that in some of the variants you may not, for example, have indicators. So obviously the indicator connections on the back of the display won't get connected. So the first thing we need to do is grab hold of our PPE. So for this job today we're going to be wearing rubber gloves. So to remove the display is quite simple. You just take a prying tool, press it firmly into one side and then into the other. You can potentially also lift this clear just with your fingernails, but that should just pull clear. There's a protective O-ring that runs around the top of the display, which is to stop any water ingress through the sides of the display. And then you have your cables bundled underneath. They're clipped together at the moment with a cable touch will remove shortly. The ones that have heat shrink on them go to your throttle and to your brake, and there's to stop the cables from ever being able to come undone during riding with any vibration or anything, because they're so safety critical. You've got two matching connectors, which are these flat ones. They go off to your indicators. So the only thing you actually need to remember is the red indicator goes to the right hand side. All the other plugs will plug in only to the socket that they're supposed to plug into, so you can't get them wrong. Okay, so the only tools we need to complete this job, we need a pair of snips to remove the heat shrink tubing and to undo that cable tie. We need a 3mm hex key to take the stem bolts out and remove the stem from the scooter. And then on the underside there's a plate which has two 2.5mm hex fittings, which you need to take that off so that we can pass the new control cable and data cable down through that. Other than that, it's just a heat gun. So for the heat gun we're going to use our safety glasses. So we need to remove this heat shrink. So first thing to remember is you've got a sharp cutting tool near your fingers, so just take extra care. And then just carefully insert them underneath the edge of the heat shrink tubing. Just carefully insert them under the edge of the heat shrink tubing and start to snip through, keeping the pressure of the blade towards the top by the heat shrink tubing, because what we don't want to do is to damage the cables inside. So starting on one side and then working through from the other. We just need to disconnect the old display. These plugs will just, most of them just pull apart. Some of them have a little press latch on them that you just need to press in. But it should disconnect quite easily. And then you're just left with one cable in this instance, which is the actual data cable, which goes down towards the motor controller. And then it's simply a case of just removing the 4 stem bolts from the side. Just continue to remove those. There's 2 on each side of the stem. And then you can lift the stem clear. Just obviously remember that the handbrake cable is still attached. And you don't have to sort of snag that or anything, but there's plenty of play in it. Underneath you'll find the connection. This is the data cable which runs down the stereo post and into the battery bay where the motor controller is. And to disconnect that, it's got a turnbuckle bolt on it, so you just undo that nut. Okay, you can pull the cables clear. Okay. It's important to make sure obviously that doesn't drop inside the stem. It's not a complete disaster if it does, you can get it back out, but just makes life a bit more simple if you don't. Now we need our 2.5mm hex key. And on the underside stem, you'll see there's 2 small hex bolts. So always loosen them off with the flat head before we move on to the faster ball train. And you can pull that clear. And it's just a case of sliding that grommet over the cable. You can pull that display clear and we can discard that for recycling. So if we're doing any other kind of work on a handlebar, what I'd normally do is either use some kind of Velcro strap or some masking tape to just carefully secure it to the side. It just avoids stretching the brake cable and avoids any damage to the paperwork. But on this one we're quite lucky because we've still got the paper protector on the steerer tube, so I'm just going to carefully let that hang for a second and just pick up a new display and the heat shrink tube. So your new display comes as a kit which includes 2 pieces of heat shrink tube and also the silicone grommet which goes around for waterproofing. The silicone grommet, if you look on the underside, there's a ridge which runs around which the grommet will sit into and locate into, and we just need to make sure that that's neatly fitted. Pass the new data cable through. So with your grommet through the plate, you want to just rotate the grommet and the plate as well to align it. So the 2 holes should be along the flat edges of the grommet. When you put it back into place, it will just take a little bit of shuffling around to get it to fit. Align the holes and then you can refit your 2 2.5mm pins. And then just a final tighten with the flat side. Doesn't need particularly tight, a couple of Newton meters, which is just, it's not even hand tight, it's just firm, for want of a better description. So you want to pull a small amount of the cable through, not too much because we need to work on the other side, just so you can hold it really. And then the 2 plugs, they have a locator on them, so there's a groove in the part going down to the motor controller and a corresponding lug inside that one. So they locate together. You can, without pushing them together too hard, you can feel when they locate and they'll just push nicely together. Obviously it's really important not to have damaged any of the pins inside there, so you don't want to go pushing and rotating. And then once plugged together, do the turn back up. So now we can put our stem back in. When we do that, just make sure that we feed the cable in first, so the cable doesn't get caught as we're trying to assemble it. Drop the handlebars back into the top of the steerer, and then we can get on with remaking our connections. So if we remember, there's 2 of the connections which have heat shrink on them to stop them from being able to come undone in vibration, and they're these 2 flat connectors. They can't connect to the wrong point, so you don't need to worry about that. And just slide the heat shrink over the part that goes into the handlebar, because it gives you more freedom to actually work on. If you try and do it the other way around, you end up with a really, really short piece of cable that you're trying to connect. Okay, then locate the corresponding connector, so obviously with a flat plug, so you're going to go into the flat socket. Make sure it's oriented the right way around. There are 2 lugs on the side and it's impossible to plug it in the wrong way around. So just make sure it's the right way around and just gently push together and it'll just snap together. So obviously on this particular model we don't have the indicators, so we have these 2 indicator cables. Remember the red one would go to the right hand side, and that 3-way connector there which would go off to the switch which would be on the left hand side. So those 3 are just redundant, you don't need to do anything with them, they can just remain inside the body. And now we're in a position where we can just switch on the scooter and check that our display works and that there's no other problems with the cable before we put it all back together. And see the display lights up, headlights come on, good to go. Okay, so now we need to heat shrink these 2 connectors. Just bring the heat shrink tube back up over both of them. And you want it sort of to sit somewhere in the middle. It's not entirely critical where it sits, but somewhere around so that your connector is in the middle of the piece of heat shrink tubing. So just bring both of those up. Okay. And then sort of hold them off to one side. You want to sort of lift them clear as far as possible. Oh, yes. So the first thing we need to just get our safety goggles. Because we're applying heat here and also the air blowing around you, you don't want something to blow into your face. It's not a huge amount of heat being applied here, but do obviously just take care as one hand's going to have to hold the cables. Okay, so you just need to put a low heat setting. can see it fairly quickly starts to shrink back. We switch off our heat gun and obviously we put it down onto something that's not flammable and allow that to cool properly. Okay, so our display is properly connected now. Just one more switch on before we put it back in so we know it's okay. And again, the display's lighting up, no problems whatsoever. Let's turn it back off. It's important to just sort of gather all the cables together and just make sure that they do sort of like seat down properly inside the stems. So just gather them down. You don't want your cables getting caught. Make sure everything's sort of sitting inside this well on the inside, and then just line the display up. Have these two prongs on each side, which will just spring into place once it's in place. So we've just got to put our 4 stem bolts back in now, which we use the ball end of the drive. So we use the longer ball joint head just to get the fittings into place. And I'm only going to loosely tighten these because we are just going to torque them to 2 Newton meters as a final step. So I just want them just really just finger tight. All of our fittings do come with patch lock, and anything you get as a kit from us as well, all of the replacement fittings that may come with it will be patch locked. But it's important to just do a final tighten. Let's take our torque wrench, which I've preset to 2 Newton meters. Just double check that, and then we just want to just give them a final tighten. Okay. 2 Newton meters is pretty low. It's just to bed in the patch lock rather than sort of necessarily tighten them to the point that it's holding them from coming loose. Okay. So one more final switch on just to check everything's working. What I have noticed servicing this scooter is that the power level is very low on it. The red light's not only on, it's flashing. Performance of the scooter is going to be really exceptionally poor at this point. If it's your own scooter, I recommend giving it a good 8 hours sort of maximum charge. But for a customer, I recommend at least giving it a couple of hours charge just before we package it back up and send it out to the customer, so when it arrives with them it's got some power in it ready to go. Some other critical checks you can just do is just check the tyre pressures, check the brake, that there's enough rolling resistance on the front brake, and just a general visual check of the scooter to highlight anything else that we might want to bring to the customer's attention.